She thought she had escaped him. The high-rise offices, the boardroom battles, and the man who once held her heart in the palm of his hand. Years ago, Christa walked away from Colton Hayes, the billionaire whose name alone commanded entire cities. She carried not only the ache of their whirlwind romance, but a secret too dangerous to reveal: their daughter. In the quiet edges of town, Christa raised little Natalia in peace, far from Colton's ruthless world of wealth and power. She told herself it was for the best. Colton lived for his empire, for deals sealed in glass towers and whispered in private jets. He didn't need to know about the child who shared his storm-gray eyes and stubborn spirit. But destiny doesn't stay buried forever. When Natalia falls gravely ill, doctors discover only one rare blood type can save her life. And there's only one man who carries it: her father. Now, standing at the doors of Colton's glittering empire, Christa trembles with dread. To save her daughter, she must face the billionaire she once loved, confess the truth she's hidden for nearly a decade, and hope that beneath the steel of his heart, there's still the man who once swore she was his forever. Because this time, it isn't about love or pride. It's about life. The fluorescent lights above the emergency ward hummed like restless bees, too bright, too cold, too unfeeling for the nightmare unraveling in front of me. The scent of antiseptic clung to everything, biting sharp against the back of my throat, and the rhythmic beeping of machines drummed in my ears like a second heartbeat. Hers, not mine. Mechanical and fragile. I sat at the edge of the hospital bed where Natalia lay, her tiny frame swallowed by stiff white sheets, her chest rising and falling with a shallow effort that made me ache in places I didn't even know I had. Her skin, usually sun-warmed and glowing, looked washed out beneath the clinical light. Her lips tinged a pale blue that no 7-year-old's lips should ever wear. She was so still. Too still, and for a terrifying moment I wondered if she even knew I was there. "Natty," I whispered, stroking back her messy brown hair damp with sweat. My voice cracked on her name. "It's Mama, I'm right here, I'm not going anywhere." The monitor beeped steadily, indifferent to my fear. A nurse adjusted an IV line with quick efficiency, offering me the kind of sympathetic smile I'd seen too often in the last hour. It was the kind that said they cared, but not enough to make promises they couldn't keep. "Dr. Levin will be in to talk to you shortly," she murmured. My hands trembled as I held Natalia's smaller ones, her fingernails painted with glitter polish she'd begged me for last weekend. She had laughed when I made a mess of painting them, a laugh so full of light it felt impossible to believe that same little girl now lay still, tethered to machines that hissed and beeped. I pressed my lips against her knuckles, desperate to feel warmth. "Mama's here," I whispered again, because words were all I had to fight the silence pressing in. The door opened softly and Dr. Levin entered, his face composed, his clipboard held like a shield. I had seen that look before, measured calm designed to soften whatever storm he was about to bring. "She's stable for the moment," he began, his voice gentle but steady, the voice of someone used to breaking fragile hearts carefully. "But the blood work has given us some answers." My breath caught. "Tell me." "She's severely anemic. Her red cell count is dangerously low. We suspect her body is attacking its own cells. The only way to stabilize her is with a transfusion." "Take mine," I blurted, shoving up my sleeve as if offering my veins would be enough to make him move faster. His eyes softened with pity. "We already typed you when she was admitted. You're O positive. Natalia is B negative, with a very rare phenotype. It isn't something we can replace with standard donor blood. The best chance for her is a direct familial match, preferably a parent." I stared at him, words crumbling into nothing. "So she needs blood from someone who shares her exact type," he said. "We've reached out to the regional blood bank, but the odds are slim. It could take days to locate, and Natalia doesn't have days." I clutched the side of the bed as my knees threatened to give way. Days. She might not have days. My little girl, the one who begged for ice cream at midnight and danced in the kitchen in mismatched socks, Might not make it to see another sunrise because of a blood type. The doctor hesitated before asking softly, "What about her father?" The words hit like glass shattering. I flinched as though he'd struck me. My eyes fell to Natalia's face, her lashes fluttering slightly in some half-dream, unaware of the storm above her. Father. A word she had asked me about, shyly, curiously, the way children ask about fairy tales. I had always told her she had me, that we were enough. I had never let his name pass my lips. My throat closed, but I forced myself to answer. He doesn't know about her. Dr. Levin blinked. Surprise flickered across his professional calm. He may be her best chance. If he's willing to be tested and if he's compatible. I shook my head violently, my voice trembling. He can't know. He can't. But the doctor's eyes held no room for secrets, only urgency. Christa, I understand this is complicated, but this isn't about the past. It's about saving your daughter's life. If there's any chance he's a match, we have to try. I gripped the bed rail until my knuckles burned. Complicated. That was the word he used, as though the man I had once loved and left could be reduced to something so small. Colton Hayes. The name echoed like thunder in my skull, dredging up boardrooms with glass walls. Nights I waited alone in a penthouse lit only by city lights. Promises whispered, then broken by ambition. I had loved him once with every fragile part of myself, and when I realized his empire always came first, I ran before he could destroy what was left. I ran carrying a secret, a heartbeat inside me that belonged to both of us. I told myself he didn't need to know, that he was too ruthless, too consumed by power to be a father. I had built my life on that decision, and now that decision might cost Natalia her life. I looked down at her, at the stubborn little tilt of her chin even in sleep. She was mine, wholly mine, and yet she was his too. I had hidden her from him, hidden myself because pride and fear told me I had to. But pride didn't matter when machines were breathing for her. Fear didn't matter when her veins cried out for something only he might be able to give. I bent low, pressing my forehead to hers. Her skin was clammy, her breath shallow, but she was here. I don't know what to do, Nati, I whispered, tears slipping down my face. I don't know how to face him again, but I will. For you, I will. The door clicked closed behind Dr. Levin, leaving us in the sterile quiet broken only by monitors. My chest tightened as the truth sank its claws into me. There was no way around it. No hiding. No more pretending the past could stay buried. If she was going to live, I would have to knock on the one door I swore I'd never open again. I would have to look into the storm-gray eyes of the man I left and tell him the truth I had guarded for 7 years. Colton Hayes, her father, the only man who could save her, and maybe the only man who could destroy me all over again. So here I stand, trembling in a cold hospital room, my daughter's fragile breath tethered to machines, my pride unraveling like a frayed thread, staring at the edge of the choice I never wanted to make. What would you do? Risk heartbreak to save your child or keep your secret safe? Morning seeped into the hospital like a pale apology, carrying the truths of who they were before the machines. Christa had learned, long before the ambulance lights, to carry 3 lives at once. The woman she was with Colton, the mother she became alone, and the fighter who stitched the two together without letting the seams show. In their apartment, top floor of a building that smelled of laundry steam and cinnamon bread, mornings followed a choreography of small mercies. The kettle's click, Natalia's mismatched socks, a lunchbox clacking as if applauding survival. Bills lived under a magnet that read, "We're still here." They were still here because Christa worked late, counted coins, and took the long route past the park so Natalia could name the moon and decide what it was thinking. There had been another top floor once, a penthouse pressed against the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a piano nobody played, champagne that tasted of victory and silence. Christa was smaller there, though the rooms were larger. Colton's world ran on calendars and conquest, a river of meetings that pulled the man along until even his laughter arrived by appointment. She loved his curiosity, the way his hands stilled when the right answer landed. He loved her ferocity, the way she argued with tenderness that made losing feel like learning. But empires are hungry. The night she left wore its own quiet. She packed necessities and the unread note she'd written twice, pressed her palm to her abdomen at the glass, and chose fear that moved forward over comfort that stood still. In the elevator's mirrored walls, she barely recognized the woman with the suitcase and a vow. The life inside her would not grow up learning love in the half-light of absences. Natalia grew into sunlight. Stubborn and bright-eyed, she bargained with bedtime, rescued pillbugs with ceremony, and asked questions so frank they cut. Do people fall out of love like leaves? How high is forever? Why don't I have a dad? Christa answered with honesty shaped for a child's hands, folding some truths for later like dresses that would fit when the next season came. She recognized parts of Colton in the girl, less in features than in flame. Natalia refused to surrender curiosity to convenience. She devoured street signs as if the city were a novel and held the flashlight while Christa fixed the sink, narrating the wrench's brave journey. When the school praised her for defending a classmate, Christa heard not anger, but allegiance. Across the river of years, Colton built higher. The papers called him decisive, unsparing, visionary. Photographs caught his jaw before the answer. The tilt of a man who expects gravity to cooperate. He lived in a high-rise where elevators smelled of leather and citrus, where windows turned the ocean into a meeting. He ate standing up and slept with one eye on tomorrow. In boardrooms, he held a room the way storm fronts hold a horizon. Yet sometimes, after the closing bell, he paused. His home hummed with absence. On rain-threaded nights, he listened for a laugh that wasn't in the blueprint. At home, Christa kept their lives small enough to hold, large enough to dream. Saturdays meant pancakes and paper crowns. Weekdays meant lists that paid for both. When the child slept, she did sums and knew the cost of every leap she chose not to make. The past threaded itself into the present in moments no one else noticed. A violin solo on the radio, a news anchor speaking his name, a gray suit in a crosswalk, each a small door she learned not to walk through. Natalia's questions matured into maps. She drew families in many configurations and asked where theirs fit. Christa pointed to the one with two figures holding hands and a sunflower taller than both. Here, she said, and here. The girl accepted it, then added a third stick figure made of sunbeams and labeled it Someday. Christa did not erase it. The hospital would not erase these histories. It would concentrate them. While monitors blinked, the mother restarted the familiar choreography, smoothing hair, tucking sheets, telling stories that stitched hours together. The child, even in fevered doze, fought the air with a frown that recalled boardrooms and stubborn mergers. The man, elsewhere, filled his day with victories that tasted faintly of ash he could not quite name. Omniscience can call it plainly. Christa left because staying would have hollowed them both. Natalia proves courage builds as much as it breaks. Colton is not cruel so much as careful, and careful men sometimes confuse walls with shelter. Each carries a secret version of the others. Christa carries the man who laughed in elevators. Natalia carries a father-shaped hypothesis. Colton carries a constellation of almosts. When the call from the school came, fainting on the playground, ambulance dispatched, Christa's world shed its quiet and became motion. She ran through the map Natalia had drawn, reached the ward with coin breath and iron prayer, and listened as science translated love into numbers. B negative, rare phenotype, parent preferred. The narrative tilts toward the future from here, but this foundation matters. The mother who left rather than vanish, the child forged from questions, the man who mistook altitude for arrival. They are 3 points of a triangle taut with history. Any movement will pull all three. The shadow at the edge of Christa's resolve is not only fear of the man she left, it is fear of being wrong about what love asks and what survival permits. In another life, pancakes would be burning and glitter nail polish would be spilled. In this one, Christa watches the rise and fall of a chest that contains every answer she ever needed and prepares to open the last door she has kept shut. She will do it because of who she is and because of who they are to one another, even if only one of them knows it yet. Even now she does anyway. The hospital room had the metallic chill of a winter morning behind glass. Christa stood beside Natalia's bed as Dr. Levin's words settled in her mind again. She needs an immediate transfusion. B-negative extended antigens. A parent is the best and fastest match. The monitor kept time with a small, stubborn heartbeat. Christa smoothed the moon blanket and nodded, as if agreement could push blood through a needle. Outside, she signed consent forms with a shaking hand. Hours, Levin had said, not days. Pride had years to grow. Fear needed only a minute. Christa picked up her bag. "I'll bring him," she said, voice iron. St. Gabriel's sat 5 lights from the skyline Colton Hayes had practically purchased. She drove like a swimmer cutting rip current, steady, ruthless. Natalia's last question replayed. "Will I go back to school soon, Mama?" "Yes," she told the empty car. "I'll make sure you go back." Hayes Consolidated occupied a tower of blue glass. Christa moved past reception before anyone decided she required permission. Elevators opened. She rose, watching a version of herself assemble, jaw tight, eyes bright with purpose. The executive floor greeted her with quiet designed to impress. A row of assistants looked up. The one in the middle, polished bob, navy dress, stood. "Good morning," the woman said. "Do you have an appointment?" "I need Colton Hayes," Christa replied. "It's a medical emergency." "I'm Marianne," the woman said, smile unwavering. "Mr. Hayes is in a closed board session. If you share the basics, I'll route appropriately." Christa stepped closer, voice low. "A 7-year-old at St. Gabriel's needs an immediate transfusion. She's B-negative with rare antigens. Colton is the most probable match." Marianne's gaze sharpened. "Are you a relative?" "I'm the mother." Something moved behind Marianne's eyes. She typed quickly, then looked up with softened caution. "Ms. Christa." "I'm sorry, Ms. Christa, but Mr. Hayes cannot be interrupted. Provide contact information and documentation, and our liaisons can—" "There isn't time for liaisons." Christa held the desk. "Every minute is a subtraction problem we can't solve later." "Policy exists to move quickly without chaos," Marianne said. "If you'll wait in the lounge, I'll see if his COO can—" "No COO has his blood." A door at the corridor's end opened. The board spilled out in sober suits. Colton walked among them with the stillness of a storm's eye, tall, tie loosened by an inch. He was mid-sentence when he saw her. Words stopped. The river of people hesitated. "Mr. Hayes," Marianne began. "We were just—" "Give us the room," he said. Assistants scattered. Directors slipped into elevators. Christa stood straight. "Hello, Colton." For a breath, his expression was only shock, then anger, then something heavier. "Christa." He examined her face like a map for a road he once took in the dark. He gestured to a glass-walled conference room. In here, they stepped inside. The city unfurled below like a ledger. He stopped 2 chairs away as if space could keep old gravity honest. "What happened?" he asked. "Natalia, our daughter collapsed at school." The name landed between them. "She's severely anemic, B-negative with extended antigens. A parent is the fastest safe match. We don't have days. We barely have hours." Something flinched beneath his control at parent. "Why are you here now?" His voice stayed level. "After all this time?" "Because she's dying without help," Christa said. "Because whatever I thought I was protecting her from is smaller than a machine breathing for her." He took a breath. "And you're certain I'm the father?" "Yes." Color drained and returned. He touched a chair and let it go. "You kept her from me." "I kept her from this," Christa said, nodding toward the wall of glass. "But I won't keep your blood from her. Be angry later. Right now she needs you." He studied her, then decision moved through him like a key turning. He reached for the door. It opened first. Marianne stood there, apology ready. Security needs... We're going to St. Gabriel's, Colton said. Have legal clear whatever the hospital needs. Call the chief of medicine. Arrange a direct cross-match. Extended antigen panel. Full compatibility workup. 30 minutes ago. Sir, there are protocols. You can quote them to me in the car. Marianne's gaze flicked to Christa, reading emergency. She nodded. Driver out front. Hospital alerted. They moved together, not touching, paced by urgency. The elevator arrived. Descent felt like falling through a past compressed to a floor. Outside, the car idled. The driver opened the door. Marianne passed a folder, phones chiming. Christa slid into the back seat. Colton followed and snapped his belt. He looked at his hands, then at the city unspooling. She's fighting, Christa said. He nodded, jaw tight. Good. So will I. They didn't speak the rest of the way. Midtown blurred. Sirens made a corridor of sound. Christa watched his reflection in the window. Storm gray eyes, a mouth that had once softened the world and then hardened it. Attraction burned through shock like a fuse. At St. Gabriel's, red lights painted the curb. Colton stepped out first and offered his hand. She didn't need it. He left it there, and after a heartbeat, she took it. Inside, Levin met them with a team that moved like a single organism. We'll take you straight to the lab, he said. Consent here. Extended panel now. We'll transfuse the moment compatibility is confirmed. Colton signed without reading. He looked once at Christa, not asking, not forgiving, only promising one thing. Where is she? 4th floor, Levin said. We'll bring you up as soon as we draw. Colton nodded and went with them. Christa watched him disappear down the corridor. The past and present merged into a single line of motion. Shock settled. Tension rose like weather. Attraction, cruel in its timing, reignited like a star remembering its fire. 9 years hadn't prepared them for this moment, and yet they had made them exactly who they needed to be to survive it. The hospital at night was a kingdom of hums and shadows, the glow of monitors standing guard like sentinels. Outside Natalia's room, Christa leaned against the cold wall, her chest tight with exhaustion. Through the glass, she could see her daughter's small form curled under the moon-printed blanket, machines tethered to her like reluctant companions. Colton stood inside, arms folded, jaw locked, watching the child as though memorizing her every breath. He had been tested, typed, confirmed, the match they needed. His blood now ran in Natalia's veins. But the silence between him and Christa held more voltage than the wires that kept their daughter alive. Finally, he turned, storm-gray eyes sharp. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was low but full of restrained fury. Each word weighted. Christa pushed off the wall. Because your world wasn't safe for her. She stepped into the room, refusing to back down. You lived for boardrooms and headlines, Colton. For battles with men who would have used a child as leverage. I wasn't going to let her grow up as collateral. His laugh was bitter, humorless. And so you decided for me. You robbed me of 7 years, her first word, her first step, every moment that mattered. Do you have any idea what you've taken? Her throat ached, but she held his gaze. I gave her safety. I gave her peace. I gave her what I thought you couldn't. Peace? His eyes flicked back to Natalia, to the tilt of her chin that mirrored his own. Do you call this peace? She's here, fighting, and I never even knew she existed. That's not peace, Christa. That's theft. The words cut deep, but she swallowed them down. Before she could respond, a small voice interrupted. Mommy? They both turned. Natalia's lashes fluttered, her gaze weak but awake. She blinked at the tall man standing near her bed. Who's he? Christa's heart clenched. She moved closer, brushing hair from her daughter's forehead. This is A friend, someone here to help you. Natalia frowned faintly, studying him with uncanny sharpness. He has my eyes. Colton froze, the impact of her words breaking his armor. He stepped closer, kneeling so he was level with her. You're very observant. Are you a doctor? Natalia asked. No, he said softly. But I gave you something important today, something you needed. Christa's heart twisted as Natalia reached out, her small hand brushing his wrist, still marked from the transfusion. Thank you, she whispered. Colton's composure fractured. He bowed his head, his shoulders trembling once before he caught himself. You don't have to thank me, his voice cracked. It's my duty. The nurse entered quietly, checking vitals, and Natalia soon drifted back into a light sleep. Silence settled again, but it was different now, charged, fragile, aching. Later, in the quiet of the family waiting room, Christa sat with her head in her hands. Colton stood by the window, staring out at the city. You think I didn't want a family? He said suddenly. That I was too cold, too ruthless to care? You don't know me, Christa. You never did. She lifted her head. I knew you. I loved you. But every time I waited for you to come home, I realized I loved a man married to ambition. I couldn't risk raising her in a world where she'd always come second. His eyes narrowed. So you made the choice for both of us. You decided I'd be a bad father without ever giving me the chance. Christa stood, trembling but firm. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was selfish. But I couldn't gamble her life on a man who didn't even see me anymore. The words hung between them, heavy as thunder. Hours later, in the stillness of the night, Christa returned to Natalia's bedside. Colton was already there, seated in the chair closest to the bed. His large hand rested on the rail, close to Natalia's smaller one, not touching but protective. Christa sat across from him, the silence stretching long. Their eyes met briefly, just a flicker, but enough. She remembered the nights he'd held her hand in the dark, whispering promises. He remembered the mornings she'd laughed in his kitchen, barefoot, alive. Old feelings stirred like embers under ash, dangerous and undeniable. At one point, Christa reached across to adjust the blanket. Her hand brushed his. The contact was accidental, fleeting, yet her pulse stuttered, and his jaw tightened as though resisting something deeper. Neither moved away quickly enough. The night wore on. Natalia stirred again, restless, and her small hand found Colton's. This time he let her hold it. His thumb brushed over her knuckles with aching gentleness. Christa watched, her heart breaking and mending at once. Colton looked across at her, his expression raw. She deserved better than lies. And she deserves more than anger, Christa replied softly. If you want to blame me, fine. But don't let that shadow touch her. He nodded once, reluctantly, his eyes fixed on the child who bound them together. In the quiet hum of machines and night, mistrust and fragile hope warred inside them both. The old wounds had reopened, but in Natalia's presence something new flickered. Unwanted, undeniable, impossible to ignore. Night pressed against the hospital windows like a held breath. Natalia's monitor, steady for hours, began to stutter, small hiccups that turned every adult in the room into a statue. Dr. Levin read the newest labs, hemoglobin dropping, oxygen saturation dipping. Christa gripped the rail and counted breaths. Colton stood opposite, gauze at his elbow, a stark badge. His blood had bought time. Time was squandering itself. We're losing stability, Levin said. Her antibodies are complicated. We may need more units and advanced support. I'm placing her on ECMO standby. What does that mean? Christa asked. We prepare for the worst while preventing it, he answered. He glanced at Colton. Another unit could help if cross-match confirms. We also have access to an advanced pediatric hematology team off-site. You can have whatever you need, Colton said. Call them, fly them. Levin nodded and stepped out, dialing, while nurses adjusted lines around the bed. Christa sat. You promised pancakes. she whispered to the sleeping child. Colton crouched beside her. "We're not done," he said. "I'll give more." She looked at him and felt the old heat and the old hurt. "You can't fix this with money." "No," he said, "but money can move expertise." He began issuing orders. A jet readied, a clinic alerted. When Levin returned with consents, Colton had already pledged support. "Do whatever keeps her here," Christa said, signing. An alarm chirped. The room tightened, then steadied. Levin nodded. "She's fighting." "So are we," Colton said. Time stretched. Natalia trembled. The monitor dipped. Christa swayed and caught herself on the rail. "We transfer," Levin decided. "The clinic is ready. Wheels up within the hour." In the elevator, their reflections stood together. Christa's face a map of prayers. His, a fortress with a few lit windows. Sirens cleared the street. On the tarmac, the jet waited. Inside, white light and whispered commands. Christa strapped in. Natalia cocooned. Colton took the jump seat, a man built for control conceding it because a 7-year-old had claimed his purpose. At altitude, Christa said, "I left because I couldn't breathe. I couldn't be furniture in your life." Colton looked at Natalia. "I deserved to be told anyway." "Maybe I was a coward," she said. "Or maybe I believed that loving you meant losing her." He exhaled. "After you left, I looked. Not with lawyers. Myself, Red Hook, Echo Park, Austin. You were always a rumor and a month too late." She turned. "You looked for me?" "For you," he said, voice roughening. "And for something I couldn't name. I told myself you'd chosen someone else. It was the only way not to go mad." "There was no one else," she whispered. "Then I made a story that punished us both. Work ate what grief couldn't." Natalia stirred. Christa reached for her hand as Colton did. Their fingers brushed and did not flinch. "If I'd found you," he said, "I would have asked you to marry me in a way that didn't feel like a contract. I would have failed sometimes. I would have kept showing up. I wanted less spectacle and more Sunday," she said. "I didn't know how to ask." The jet began to descend. "If she makes it," he said, "tell me how to be her father without taking her from you." "Start by being here when she wakes," Christa said. The clinic met them with choreography. Blood bank primed, specialists waiting. Papers passed, consents multiplied. Colton signed, Christa prayed. When doors swallowed Natalia and the team, silence pooled. Colton braced a hand on the wall. "I thought winning meant never begging. I'm begging now." Christa touched his sleeve. "Then beg with me." Minutes unspooled. They waited, shoulders barely touching, breathing together. A nurse emerged. "Transfusion proceeding. Compatibility confirmed. She's tolerating well." Christa closed her eyes. Colton let his head tap the wall and laughed once, broken and bright. "I kept expecting to stop loving you," she admitted. "It never took." "I kept expecting to feel complete," he said. "It never happened." The nurse returned. Numbers were improving. Colton reached for Christa, and she let him. The hold was not romance, but refuge. A question rose like a tide, for anyone listening. When love has been bent by time and choices, do you give it a second shape, or let it stay broken? Share what you do, and why. The doors opened. Levin motioned them in. Monica, the transfusion lead, reported steady vitals and good response. Natalia slept, less gray, more girl. Colton touched 2 fingers to the rail as if swearing an oath. Christa took the other side, their eyes meeting over their daughter's small, stubborn breath. Regret had not dissolved. It had been given a job. Longing hummed between them, an invitation to try later if the world was kind. In the quiet that followed, the vending machine hummed like a faraway hive. Christa fetched 2 paper cups of coffee and set one beside him. He didn't touch it. He was watching the door as if patience itself were a muscle he had finally decided to train. "I used to rehearse apologies on nights I couldn't sleep. he said without looking at her. They all sounded like speeches. This is the only one that feels true. I should have found you sooner. I should have been a man you could trust with the whole truth. She wrapped her hands around the cup, letting the heat anchor her. And I should have trusted you with the part that mattered most. I was brave leaving. I wasn't brave telling. He nodded once, gratitude and grief braided in the motion. If we get the chance, he said, let's be brave in the same direction. Down the hall a monitor chimed, not in alarm but in steady reassurance, and both of them breathed easier. Night folded over the private clinic like a black wing. The windows reflected slivers of city light, but inside Natalia's room, the glow was thin and artificial, the air too clean to feel kind. The monitors that had steadied earlier began to stutter, a syncopation that made every adult in the room hold breath as if oxygen could be lent. Dr. Levin came fast, his calm stripped to bone. Complications, he said. Possible hemolysis, pulmonary strain. We're escalating support. Nurses moved as one body. Checks, syringes, ventilatory adjustments. A respiratory therapist increased flow. A transfusion nurse consulted the panel of antigens again, lips pressed flat. Colton stood with his hands open at his sides, as if he had forgotten what hands were for. The gauze at his elbow had been replaced twice. His blood had bought tide, and the tide was leaving anyway. Talk to me, Christa said, voice rough. What's happening now? Levin didn't sugarcoat. Her body is reacting unpredictably. We're at maximum medication support. If she doesn't respond in the next 30 minutes, we consider emergent ECMO. It isn't a decision we take lightly. The word hung, heavy and cold. Christa felt the floor flex, or maybe it was her knees. She braced on the rail. Is she in pain? She's sedated, Levin said gently. She won't feel this. The monitor alarmed, then quieted, then alarmed again. Natalia's lashes fluttered once, uselessly, as if her body remembered childhood instincts and tried to wake. The ventilator sighed, patient and implacable. Christa leaned close to the small face and whispered a litany of ordinary things, pancakes, glitter nail polish, the sunflower taller than both of them. I'm here, she said. I'm here. I'm here. Across the bed, Colton broke. It wasn't dramatic. It was something coming apart precisely and without permission. His jaw unclenched, his eyes shone and spilled. His breath left him like an oath taken and revoked in the same second. He took one step back and hit the wall with his shoulder, sliding down until he sat on the polished floor as if gravity had doubled. He covered his mouth with his hand to cage the sound. Christa looked up, stunned by a wound she had never seen in him. He'd kept storms behind glass. Now they were weathering him in public. Colton, she said, not sure if the warning was for him or for herself. He dropped his hand. I just found her, he said. I just found her. The words were paper-thin and bleeding at the edges. I didn't know a person could be made and named without me and still be mine this completely. I didn't know, and now the universe thinks it's efficient to take her back? No one answered. Even Levin's silence was respectful. A nurse checked a line and withdrew. Colton scrubbed his face with both hands and stood, unsteady. He went to the rail and gripped it until his knuckles blanched, then forced his fingers to relax so he wouldn't look like a man trying to wring life from metal. He looked at Christa, the grief in him curdling into anger because anger could move. You did this, he said softly. You kept her from me. You kept me from her. If she... The sentence snapped. He swallowed. If she doesn't make it through this night, I will never forgive you. Christa took the hit without defense. Something inside her accepted the verdict because she had been delivering it to herself for hours. I know, she said. I will never forgive me either. He blinked, as if he had expected a fight to push against. Fury, stripped of friction, faltered. He gestured vaguely at the glass, at the city, at the hospital that money had conjured from the sky. I did everything I know how to do. It's not enough. It's not. We did everything, she said. Sometimes it still isn't. The truth hurt precisely because it didn't excuse anything. Another alarm. Nurses again. Levin's voice level, decisive. Prepare for cannulation. We're going to the line. Christa's stomach turned to stone. Is there any other option? If there were, I'd take it, Levin said. This gives us time. Time is life right now. Time had been the one thing Christa had squandered most royally. She saw 7 years of quiet decisions, each made to keep Storm and Empire away from their door, now rearranging themselves into a catastrophic bill. She tried to breathe and tasted metal. I should have told you the day she was born, she said, not to earn mercy, but because truth belonged somewhere. I told myself 100 noble stories. All of them were afraid. Afraid of me, he said. Afraid of what loving you turned me into, she said. Afraid that she'd learn to measure herself by your calendar. Afraid I'd vanish inside your edges again. She pressed her fingertips to the rail. I was wrong about some of it, and right about some of it, and none of that matters if she doesn't breathe through dawn. He closed his eyes, jaw flexing. If she lives, I'm petitioning for custody. The room tilted. What? Joint, if you'll cooperate. Soul, if you won't. His voice didn't rise. It deepened. You stole years. You don't get to steal the rest. She will not grow up a rumor in my life. The blow landed with mathematical accuracy. Christa's hand slid from the rail. You'd take her from the person who kept her alive when no one else knew she existed? I'd keep her from being kept from me, he said. We can argue the calculus of your sacrifice later. Tonight, I'm stating the terms of my love plainly because diplomacy already lost too much. Levin raised a hand, the mediator who had seen parents disassemble in worse rooms than this. Now is for medicine. Colton nodded once, a soldier remembering orders. Do what you have to do, he told the team, and stepped back. They moved. Drapes, sterile trays, a hush-like prayer. Christa watched the choreography and counted seconds, then forgot how numbers worked. She remembered Natalia at 3, insisting on carrying her own backpack because strength, at 5, bargaining 2 more minutes of stories because wonder. She remembered the night she left the tower and chose a hallway without marble, a future without announced arrivals. I am sorry, she whispered, to the child, to the man, to the self who had believed that perfection was the ticket price of safety. Colton stood at the window now, forehead to the glass, a silhouette carved from refusal. His reflection looked back, dangerous and devastated. He had never been this undone in public. Then again, he had never been this person. Walls had kept him efficient. Tonight, efficiency had to watch. The procedure advanced. A nurse narrated points to a recorder. Another adjusted vasopressors. Levin's hands were sure. Christa felt each step as an echo in her chest. She did not pray for miracles. She prayed for margins. 2% here, 3 there. Enough for a child to cross. Minutes later, the room exhaled as one animal. Cannula's in, Levin said. Flow established. Numbers are responding. Christa sagged into the chair because her legs no longer trusted her. Colton did not move from the window. He made a small sound, half laugh, half wound. She's on a machine. She's on time, Levin said. We've bought some. Time stretched thin anyway. Nurses dimmed lights. The machine hummed like a second moon. Christa folded her hands beneath her chin to keep them from shaking. Across the room, Colton wiped his face with both palms and finally turned. The look in his eyes was a map of edges. Love sharpened to a point, grief drawing borders, rage looking for a nameplate. We are not finished, he said, voice scraped raw. With her. With this. With us. Christa nodded because arguing would have been a luxury. She studied the child between them and realized hope had been demoted to something smaller than a promise, bigger than a lie. Persistence. The night stacked itself hour upon hour. Levin left with instructions. The team settled to quiet vigilance. In the shared dim, 2 chairs faced a bed that had become a country, and the borders were guarded by a pair who did not trust each other and could not leave. Despair has a sound. It is the steady machine and the breath you keep taking anyway, because if you stop, you might be asked to stop for real. The clinic at last went still. Dawn promised nothing. The night bled into morning. The world outside the clinic washed pale gold. Machines hummed steady. Monitors painted green constellations in the dim light. Natalia lay between them, a fragile warrior wrapped in wires and moon-printed blankets. Christa's head jerked up when she noticed it, the subtle pink tint returning to her daughter's cheeks, the monitor line less jagged, the breathing less forced. She leaned forward, heart skittering. "Nadi?" Colton, who had not slept, shifted closer from his chair on the other side of the bed. His tie was gone, his shirt rolled at the sleeves, his donor bandage still taped at the crook of his arm. He looked at the screen, then at the girl, then at Christa with something rawer than triumph, something like prayer granted. Natalia stirred. Her lashes trembled. Her lips parted around a papery whisper. "Mommy?" Christa was already there, smoothing sweat-damp hair. "I'm here, baby. You're safe." Her daughter's gaze, cloudy but curious, slid past her to the tall man at the other side of the bed. "He's here too," she whispered, confusion creasing her brow. "Your friend." The word cut sharper than it should. Christa's throat tightened. She had spoken that lie days ago, thinking it would protect, not realizing how cruel it would sound once the truth demanded to breathe. Natalia blinked between them. "Why does he look like me?" The silence thickened until Christa could feel Colton's eyes on her, urging, demanding. She had carried secrets through 7 long years, and in this room they cracked open like glass. Christa took Natalia's hand, careful of the tape and tubing. "Sweetheart," she began, voice unsteady but sure. "I wasn't honest with you before. He's not just a friend." She swallowed, then forced herself to continue. This man is your father." The words landed with all the weight of withheld years. Natalia's eyes widened, not in fear but recognition, as though she had known the truth all along, but had been waiting for her mother to admit it. "My father," she echoed softly, then turned her gaze to Colton. "You." Colton's throat worked. He sank to his knees so his eyes met hers level. Storm gray softened into something almost fragile. "Yes," he said hoarsely, "I'm your father, and I'm so sorry I wasn't here sooner, but I am here now, if you'll let me." For a beat, the world stilled. Then Natalia's small fingers left her mother's hand and reached for his. "That's why we have the same eyes." The fragile sound that escaped Colton's chest was nothing like the commanding voice that ruled boardrooms. He took her hand with reverence, cradling it as if it were a crown. "Yes," he whispered, his voice breaking. "That's exactly why." Christa pressed her fist to her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. The sight of her daughter's tiny hand wrapped in Colton's larger one, the mirror of 2 flames meeting, burned away any room for lies. Natalia's eyelids fluttered with exhaustion, but not before she whispered the word that shattered Colton's last defense. "Dad." Colton closed his eyes, shoulders trembling as though he had been knighted and broken all in one breath. "I'll never leave you," he vowed. "Never again." When Natalia drifted back to sleep, the room filled with quiet, not the brittle silence of secrets, but the heavy, healing quiet of truth finally spoken. Christa sat back, drained but lighter, as though a weight she'd carried for years had finally been set down. She looked at Colton, expecting him to gloat, to rage again, to seize control now that he had the title she had kept from him. But his gaze was fixed on their daughter, wet with tears he didn't bother to hide. Later, in the waiting alcove, their voices rose in low argument until exhaustion cracked them open. "I don't want power over you, Christa," Colton said, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "I don't want leverage or revenge. I don't want to take her from you. I want both of you. I want us. That's it." She blinked, stunned by the simplicity. "You don't get to say that like the past didn't happen." "No," he admitted. "The past is a mess I'll never forgive myself for. But last night, when I thought I'd lose her before I even had her, it taught me something. Control doesn't matter. Winning doesn't matter. All I want is to love you both, in whatever way you'll let me." Christa's breath caught. This was not the ruthless billionaire she had run from. This was a man stripped down to what remained when ambition failed. "And if I can't forgive you?" she asked. "Then let me try anyway," he said. "Let me prove it's not just words. Hold me accountable, but don't shut me out." Her heart twisted, caught between caution and the echo of love she thought she had buried. She searched his face, the same sharp lines, the same storm in his eyes, but beneath it was a softness, a desperation, a love that had survived absence. Christa leaned against the wall, suddenly weary. "She needs us both. That's all that matters now." He nodded. "Then start there. Start with her. And maybe, one day, with us again." Back in the room, Natalia stirred once more, demanding a popsicle with the stubbornness that was pure Colton. They laughed absurdly at the audacity of a girl who had almost slipped away hours before. She held both their hands this time, one small fist binding them together across her blanket. Christa glanced at Colton, and for the first time in years, she did not see a threat. She saw the father her daughter needed, and, though she would not say it aloud yet, the man her heart still wanted. The air shifted, fragile hope threading into the broken places. The clinic's quiet had barely settled when Marianne rushed in, face pale, tablet clutched to her chest. "We have a problem," she said. Colton straightened immediately. "What kind of problem?" She hesitated, glancing at Christa, then lowered her voice. "The press. Someone leaked a photo, one of you carrying the child through the hospital doors. It's already everywhere. They're calling her your secret heir." Christa's stomach dropped. "No." Marianne turned the screen. Headlines scrolled fast, flashing red across financial tickers. "Hayes heir in hiding? Billionaire's secret family. Shareholders demand answers." Below, a blurry photo. Colton outside the clinic at dawn, Christa just behind him, Natalia's small head against his shoulder. "Who leaked it?" Colton asked, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Could have been hospital staff. Maybe a rival watching your movements. Doesn't matter anymore. It's out. And the board has called an emergency session." Christa's pulse raced. "What will they do?" "They'll try to contain the fallout," Marianne said. "But Colton..." She hesitated. "They've already drafted an agreement. They want you to sign it." Colton's jaw flexed. "What kind of agreement?" Marianne swallowed. "To distance yourself legally. No acknowledgement of paternity. No public mention of Christa or the child. They want you to issue a statement. Rumors exaggerated. Patient unrelated. Quiet it before investors revolt." Christa's throat closed. The nightmare she had always feared was unfolding in real time. Colton choosing empire over them. But Colton only said, "When and where?" 2:00, conference floor. He turned to Christa. "Come with me." Her instinct was to refuse, to hide, but Natalia stirred in her sleep, fragile and brave, and Christa realized the lie had already ended. She nodded. "Yes." The tower's conference floor was glass and steel, a cold stage built for power. Directors sat in a sharp curve, faces grim. Behind them, screens displayed plunging stock graphs and news tickers screaming scandal. Cedric Vaughn, the chairman, slid a folder across the table. "Mr. Hayes, we've kept this company insulated from personal chaos for decades. This," he tapped the headlines, Jeopardizes billions. Sign this separation agreement and we'll issue a denial. Keep the girl out of sight, keep the mother silent, and this storm passes. Christa's stomach turned. The words "keep silent" echoed like a threat. Colton didn't even sit. He flipped through the agreement, eyes skimming. Non-disclosure, gag orders, no legal acknowledgement of paternity. A quiet buyout for Christa. He closed the folder slowly. No. Cedric's jaw tightened. This isn't a choice, Colton. The market will destroy us. The market doesn't own my daughter, Colton said, voice low but steady. You have responsibilities beyond yourself, Cedric shot back. Tens of thousands of employees. Entire sectors tied to Hayes Consolidated. You can't gamble that for sentimentality. Christa felt her breath snag. She braced herself for Colton's compromise, the one he had made so many times before. Instead, Colton looked them each in the eye. If you think love is sentimentality, you've forgotten why we build anything at all. Silence rippled like a stone dropped in water. Cedric leaned back. Then understand the consequence. You'll lose confidence, votes, control. You may not walk out of this room CEO. Colton straightened, unflinching. Then I walk out a father. Minutes later, the elevator carried them down. Christa stood stiff at his side, torn between awe and fear. Do you know what you've just risked? She whispered. Yes, he said simply. Everything that never mattered half as much as she does. When the doors opened, the lobby was a riot of cameras and shouting. Reporters had already swarmed. Security tried to hold them back, but the noise pressed like a wave. Marianne handed Colton a microphone. You don't have to do this. Yes, he said again. I do. Flashbulbs lit the marble steps. Colton raised a hand for quiet, and when the noise thinned, he spoke. There's been speculation in the press, he began, voice steady, resonant. It's true. I have a daughter. Her name is Natalia. She is the bravest person I've ever met, and she is mine. Gasps surged through the crowd. Questions fired at once. Did you hide her? Who is the mother? Are you stepping down? Colton waited, then answered the one that mattered. I didn't know until recently. That is my failure, not hers. Christa protected our child when I didn't even know she existed. Now I will protect them both, openly. If the cost is my empire, then so be it. Because what good is a kingdom if you lose your blood to keep it standing? The plaza stilled, the words echoing louder than the shouting ever had. A reporter turned to Christa. Is this true? Are you the mother? Christa's heart hammered. Every instinct screamed to run, to shield Natalia from lenses and headlines. But Colton's hand brushed hers, not as command, but as anchor. She raised her chin. Yes, she said. I am. And our daughter is recovering. That's all I care about. The rest we'll face together. Are you a couple? Someone shouted. Christa hesitated, then met Colton's gaze. For once, she saw not the ruthless billionaire, but the man who had knelt by their daughter's bed and wept, the man who had chosen truth over empire. We're a family, she said, and we're learning how to be one. Colton smiled, small, unguarded, meant only for her. Then, for the cameras, any harassment of my daughter or Christa will be met with the full force of my resources. That is all. He dropped the microphone, took Christa's hand in full view of the world, and led her back inside. Later, in the quiet of the clinic, Natalia stirred awake. Her eyes found them both, and her lips curved faintly. You're still here. Christa kissed her forehead. Always. Colton leaned close, voice soft. And now everyone knows. No more hiding. Natalia smiled sleepily. Good. Then you can both stay forever. Christa looked at him, tears hot on her cheeks, and for the first time she let herself believe. She leaned into him, and when his lips met hers, it wasn't desperation. It was homecoming. The monitors hummed steady, the child between them breathed strong, and outside, the world roared. But inside this room, There was only triumph, relief, and the love they had fought to reclaim. The world I used to know was measured in numbers. Stock ticks, contract clauses, boardroom votes. Everything could be bought, bent, or buried with enough strategy. But in this quiet room, none of it mattered. All that mattered was the sound of my daughter's laughter. Natalia sat propped against her pillows, hair in crooked braids that made her look like a queen and a mischief maker all at once. She giggled at the way I read the storybook, mocking my deep growl for the dragon and my too high falsetto for the princess. "Dad," she wheezed, nearly dropping the book, "you're terrible at this." I shut it with a solemn snap, forcing my face into mock dignity. Then perhaps the princess should save herself. She rolled her eyes, the very same storm gray eyes I saw in the mirror every morning, and snatched the book back, launching into her own exaggerated performance. I sat there, watching, unable to decide which miracle floored me more, hearing her call me Dad like it had always been true, or hearing her voice strong enough to carry again. When I glanced toward the door, Christa was there. Arms folded, smile curving soft and proud, eyes glinting with something I hadn't seen directed at me in years. Something I used to crave and lost, and God help me, I wanted it back. Later, Natalia drifted to sleep, fingers still curled around the book. Christa tucked the blanket around her shoulders, brushing hair from her forehead with the tenderness of a woman who had carried every burden alone for too long. I had missed 7 years of these small gestures, these ordinary sanctities. 7 years I couldn't get back. I sat across from her, silence folding around us. Once, silence in my world meant weakness, space for a rival to strike. Now, with her across from me and our daughter safe between us, silence was a balm. "She's strong," Christa whispered, her voice barely rising above the hum of the monitors. "She's you," I said. Her eyes lifted, wet and shining. "She's you too." That truth cut deeper than I was ready for. I had missed first steps, first words, birthday candles. Yet here she was, alive, stubborn, carrying my fire in her gaze and her mother's quiet steel in her bones. For once I had no defense against the ache of gratitude. Evening fell, painting the walls in amber. Natalia slept on, lips parted in dreams. I rose, needing to stand, to move, to do anything before the words inside me rotted from being unsaid. Christa looked up when I stopped in front of her. I held out my hands, not as command, but as plea. She hesitated, then gave them to me, warm and trembling. "I've built towers," I told her. My voice was rough, stripped of armor. "I've burned years chasing things that crumble when you touch them, but none of it mattered. Not compared to you, not compared to her." Her lips parted. "Colton." "No more running," I said. Every word was a vow. "Be mine, both of you, forever." I didn't kneel. I didn't bring diamonds or boardroom declarations. I only brought the truth, laid bare in my hands holding hers. Her tears slid freely now. For one agonizing heartbeat, she said nothing. Then her shoulders shook with a breath that carried 7 years of fear. "I was never not yours," she whispered. "I was just afraid." I pulled her against me, holding her as though she might still disappear if I didn't. Her forehead pressed to my chest, her breath warm against my shirt, and for the first time in years, the constant war drum in my chest quieted. This was what victory felt like. A rustle drew us both back to the bed. Natalia had stirred, eyes half open, gaze finding us tangled together. A sleepy smile curved her lips. "Told you," she murmured, voice thin but sure. "Both should hold." Christa laughed through her tears. I brushed a hand over my daughter's hair, nodding solemnly. "Both will hold," I promised. Weeks later, we walked out of the clinic together. The city beyond waited with its cameras, its questions, its endless demands. I used to live for that battlefield. Now I barely glanced at it. Inside the car, Natalia leaned against my shoulder, finally free of wires and monitors. Christa's hand slipped into mine, not because I pulled, but because she chose. I stared at the two of them, the family I hadn't known I was missing, the family I would burn kingdoms to keep. And for the first time in my life, I didn't crave another empire. I didn't need another tower to climb because I had already won the only victory that mattered.